And then Matt, if you want to like pull up your slideshow or whatever, or if you want to start, I think we can start. And then I'm going to put just a recording of the presentation up on YouTube once we're done.
On our YouTube channel?
Nope, I made like a channel for just specifically for our monthly workshops for next gen.
Cool. Yeah, our videos are, the stats on our videos are so bad. I just wonder what the problem is. Like really bad. Like I could just put a video up of anything and it would get more views than our like cool videos get. I don't know, something's wrong. Anyways, yeah, I'm glad to start. What were you thinking? Yeah, we have a good number of people in here. So, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So today we're going to talk about the Geographic Information Systems program at the North Country Trail Association. I wanted to take a minute and do kind of like an introduction thing, and then I'll go over like both, just give some brief background into the North Country Trail itself and how that relates to the North Country Trail Association. Then we'll talk about mapping and computer stuff and touch on, some of the applications of where we use it beyond just the, the trail user maps and stuff that you might be familiar with. So I will go first. So my name is Matt Robotham. I'm in Traverse City, Michigan. I have a geography degree from Grand Valley State University and sort of an information systems minor, although I don't think I officially had a minor. I think I just kind of made up my own minor. I interned with the North Country Trail Association in 2002, and then kind of right during college and right after college had a job at a community planning firm briefly, and then a position opened up at North Country Trail Association, and I was hired for that. And I've gone from the GIS assistant to the GIS coordinator, and now the GIS program manager. At the time I was hired, there was another GIS person in our program area, and now there's kind of only me, although you'll see there's many other folks that do GIS stuff. And then just a little bit about me, my current outdoor interests. I'm into trail running and ski joring and hiking, kind of all three of those with my dog. I consider myself an intermediate backpacker. I haven't done any through hikes or anything like that, but have backpacked a fair bit, mostly just in the upper Midwest and Colorado and a little bit in California. Before I had kids, I was into recreational dog mushing, kind of fell into that and did that for like 10 years. And I'm also into fly fishing. So those two things have gotten me out in the woods, mostly over the upper Midwest. Okay, so I thought maybe we could just jump around. I'm not sure the best way to facilitate that. Do you think like popcorn style, Felicia can go after me, and then we'll just call that person calls the next person. And you can just be as brief or as detailed as you want. But I thought since I had you here, I would ask the question like, what maps or other navigational resources do you like to use when you're out and about? Felicia.
Yeah, I can start, and then I'll popcorn to somebody else, and then they can pick the next person, and we'll go like that. Felicia, I am located in Redwing, Minnesota. You guys all know who I am because I organized this meeting. And my favorite mapping or navigational resource to use while I'm hiking is usually Gaia GPS. I've like flip-flopped between many different apps out there, and it's just hard to like find one that has all the different trails on it. But yeah, I'm going to popcorn over to Madeline.
My name's Madeline. I am located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Some background information. I have been backpacking for, I don't know, I think my husband and I, our first backpacking trip was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, and we've just gone a couple of times each summer. And I feel like I've been using Avenza most recently, but whenever I have like decent service, I use Strava just to like log my miles. I never really hiked anywhere where like navigation was very challenging because it intimidates me, to be honest. And I will popcorn over to Peyton.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peyton. I am locked out of my apartment in Madison, Wisconsin. I mean, I just forgot my keys and my fiance is at the grocery store across the street, so I'm just waiting for him. Anyways, I like to use All Trails. That's been pretty good if I download the map beforehand. I've been wanting to give Gaia a try. My outdoor activities are mushroom hunting. I just did a 14er in Colorado, which was fun. Obviously camping and very amateur rock climbing. I am going to popcorn over to Brianna.
Hi, I'm Brianna. I'm from Holland, Michigan, but I go to school in Marquette, Michigan. And I don't really use maps that much when I hike, but if I do, it's All Trails or I will like log it on Strava. And then I'll go to Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I'm located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Usually when I do use maps, I use All Trails or Strava, sometimes Avenza, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll popcorn over to Lisa.
Hi, sorry I'm off camera. I'm like making supper while doing this because I have to run after the meeting. But I'm in Madison, Wisconsin as well, but not locked out of my apartment. Just kidding, Peyton. I like to use Gaia, and I've also like used CalTopo and Onyx for other things. So if I'm not like doing a specific trail, sometimes I'll usually use Gaia, but for like the Ice Age Trail, Far Out is really nice, and Avenza for the NCT, obviously. I will popcorn to, let's see. Oh no, Far Out used to be Gut Hook, Madeline. And I'll popcorn to Tessa.
Hi, I'm Tessa. I am in Ironwood, Michigan. I'm originally from Ohio, but I work for the Forest Service up here. So I like to use Avenza because it's what I use for work, and I'm pretty familiar with like the way it works and the interface, and I know how to like upload my points that I take or like share that information. And Avenza lets you do like a ton of different like layers if you have access to GIS. So for work, we use like the LiDAR maps a lot. And that's the kind of thing that I like to be able to see. Yep. And I will popcorn over to Connor.
Hey, I'm Connor. I'm in Charlevoix, Michigan. For maps, I really don't use any unless I'm using like Strava to track my hikes. And then if I really need to and actually have service, I'll hop on All Trails. That's pretty much all I've ever really used, but I'm excited with all these other suggestions to actually check out. And then for background, I've just been hiking my whole life, and within like the past 3 years or so, I've just started hiking more seriously, and I just really enjoy doing really longer day hikes, and I'm hiking for like at least 5 hours during the day. And has everybody already gone?
I think so.
Okay,
Am I right, Felicia?
Cool, awesome.
Cool. Yeah. Interesting that Strava came up so much. I use that too. And then I wasn't thinking about this, but I realized I 100% like just make maps for like, there's a land conservancy around me that has a bunch of trails, and they just have like, I'll just take a PDF of their map and like bring it into GIS and turn it into an Avenza map that I can just use on my own. So I feel like I'm kind of in this weird advantage there, like, you know, having GIS at my fingertips to kind of make my own stuff. So cool. All right, so I wanted to just talk briefly about the North Country National Scenic Trail and kind of relate that to the North Country Trail Association. So currently there's over 4,800 miles, and that kind of breaks down as you see here on the screen. These are like hot off the press numbers. I just ran them this afternoon when I was putting this together. So we've built 3,243 miles of off-road trail. That's amazing. That's like more than any other national scenic trail, right? That's like off-road, you know, that's done, ready to go. And then 1,605 miles still routed on the road. So for those thru hikers, that is, I just can't imagine, you know, doing 1,000 miles of anything, yet alone 1,600 miles of road walking. But folks are out there doing it, and it's much respect to them. So it's cool. So this, I'm sure most of you know, the North Country National Scenic Trail was authorized by an amendment to the National Trail System Act from 1968. The amendment happened in 1980. And that's, you know, designated the North Country National Scenic Trail. The North Country Trail, being a national scenic trail, is administered by the National Park Service. So national scenic trails are generally administered by either the National Park Service or National Forest Service. I think the Bureau of Land Management could also administer one. I'm not sure that they actually administer a national scenic trail. So we have a National Park Service office. It previously was in Madison, Wisconsin, because that office managed the Ice Age National Scenic Trail and the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. And a number of years ago, they split the offices apart and gave us our own North Country office, which is a really more appropriate thing to do for like the longest national scenic trail in the country. So that office is now located in Lowell, Michigan, and there's about 7 National Park Service staff that work there. And I don't know how familiar you are with the National Trail System Act, but I really like this part of it. It says that, you know, Congress recognizes the contributions that volunteers and private nonprofit trail groups have made to bringing these trails to fruition. You know, the Appalachian Trail was in large part put in place, you know, prior to it being established as a national scenic trail, and that was done, you know, through volunteer efforts. So the legislation recognizes that, and it calls for volunteer involvement in the management and planning of these trails where possible. So that's pretty cool. That's like right in the language in the National Trail System Act, and that's kind of where the North Country Trail Association comes in. The North Country Trail Association is the National Park Service's primary partner in building and maintaining the North Country Trail, and we're funded with the Park Service what's called a cooperative agreement. So we have like this agreement that we get a large part of our funding and a large part of the, like, in the congressional budget, there is a line item for North Country National Scenic Trail with a dollar amount associated with it. By the time it makes its way to we call it the NOCO, Park Service office in Lowell, a large part of that money is given to the North Country Trail Association for, you know, the work that we do in building, maintaining, promoting the trail. And that all is because of that language in the National Trail System Act. So the North Country Trail Association is an interesting entity. We're, you know, have well over 1,000 individuals that volunteer each year along the trail, you know, totaling the hours vary greatly, but, you know, here's a stat of, you know, 75,000 hours. So within the North Country Trail Association, as we're a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit, we have chartered organizations and we call them chapters. So this would be like the Jordan 45 chapter, West Michigan chapter, the Itasca Moraine chapter in Minnesota, Heritage chapter, Schwamigan chapter in Wisconsin. Those are different than like an Appalachian Trail Club, which is its own 501c3 nonprofit. These are like entities within the North Country Trail Association. So for example, like they can't really do any like legal activity, like if we were to get a trail easement in one of their areas, like it actually has to be signed by our executive director or like the board president of the association. They can't actually like take any binding action on behalf of the North Country Trail Association. And then in addition to our 29 chapters, we have about 7 active trail maintaining affiliates, and the big 3 are the Finger Lakes Trail in New York, the Buckeye Trail in Ohio, and the Superior Hiking Trail Association in Minnesota. All 3 of those existed before the North Country Trail was put into place. So they're kind of their own nonprofit organizations with varying amounts of staff and huge volunteer bases. All 3 of them have huge volunteer bases, and they're really good at what they do. But it makes for an interesting situation with the North Country Trail, especially when we try to represent the trail as a whole to the public. You know, Finger Lakes is already doing that for their section. Buckeye Trail is already doing that for their section. Superior for their section. So a lot of the national efforts we try to do, we're not able to distribute detailed mapping information for those sections because those affiliate groups do that. So we'll be working, or we are working with the developers from the Far Out app, and we'll have to rely on the Buckeye Trail Association, Superior Hiking Trail Association, Finger Lakes Trail Conference to provide an app for the, they'll have to work with the developers of Far Out, or there just won't be those sections in the overall North Country Trail app. So we'll kind of have these holes. So it's, in some ways it's unfortunate, but it's also cool that there's these kind of big organizations that are hyper-focused on those unique sections of trail. So it's just, makes for another unique aspect of the North Country Trail. We are different than kind of, your Triple Crown trails. We're not up in a particular mountain range. We're in a challenging landscape to build trail. It's a working landscape with, people living and doing all kinds of, agricultural and industrial activities and things like that. So it's just one more unique aspect of the NCT. And please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Is that all? Any questions about kind of the administrative type stuff or nonprofit type stuff? All right. I will jump into kind of going over our GIS and mapping program at North Country Trail Association. So we use some software that's called Geographic Information Systems, GIS. And I just simply like to describe this as GIS is kind of one part visual. It's, this is just a screenshot of our online map. And then behind the visual aspect to it is this database component. So for each piece of trail or each campsite point or parking lot point, we record a whole host of information. Here's kind of what the software looks like. So this is what I spend a lot of my time looking at this view. But I basically, highlighted a segment of trail, and then you can see there's just a standard database built into it. So ESRI is kind of like the Microsoft, so to speak, of the GIS world. They're kind of the industry standard software. So we use ESRI's ArcGIS software. We use both a desktop version that I showed you a second ago, and then we also use their online product as well. If you've used our online map on the website, that's driven by that system. And we use a number of other things. Onyx Maps is becoming more and more a tool that we're using. Obviously to pull up property information, but it's also helpful to, use out in the field and actually maybe record a track of, if you're working with a landowner or something like that. We generally work on either an iPhone, and an iPhone generally can pull a pretty good GPS signal for our purposes, or we'll use an iPad with this Bluetooth GPS device made by a company called Bad Elf. It was super cool a number of years ago. Now we're kind of looking for other, they haven't updated much in the last couple of years. So we're kind of looking at other options and maybe possibly looking at kind of going back to more survey grade type stuff produced by Trimble or Lechia Geosystems. And then we use Avenza maps a lot. We prepare maps in the office, bring them up on the iPad. We can have land managers out in the field with us or volunteers and show them exactly like the reroute we're considering, things like that. And then in my work, I use Photoshop a lot and Illustrator to a limited degree for producing more, outreach or publication type map products. So all this started in basically 1999. Our Park Service office, like I said, was located in Madison, Wisconsin at the time. And the regional Park Service, like the Midwest Regional Office of the Park Service, also had like a cooperative office with UW-Madison. And I think they basically just had like some interns go through and digitize all these, 2 foot by 3 foot maps with like, this is like tape that they would lay, like it's a Scotch tape type material with different symbology on it. And they would lay that on the maps where the trail was or where it was planned to be, and use different paste on marker symbols and things like that. So, someone went through and painstakingly puts, probably roughly 3,000 miles of trail into a computer system in 1999. And eventually, one of the last interns to work on that was hired by the NCTA to be the first kind of GIS mapping person. Her original position was focused heavily on just like making maps. Like people just wanted to see the North Country Trail on a map. GIS is a lot more that it can do, a lot of analysis, modeling, things like that. And we've been pretty slow to roll those more powerful aspects of GIS into our toolkit at North Country Trail Association. But more and more, it's becoming something that other staff is using, and the online map, having the software itself is very cumbersome to use. So having a more streamlined user interface through the web has really put it in the hands of a lot more folks, both at the Park Service office and at the NCTA. And all of that time, we've continued to be the primary producer of trail user and hiking maps. So we kind of have 2 core data sets that are unique to the North Country Trail that we are the maintainers of. So one being the center line for the actual trail itself. And then we, of course, record a point feature set for all of our parking, camping, stuff like that. So I kind of hinted earlier, like I said, it's visual, it's maps, but it's also this behind the scenes database thing. And so, for example, for the center line, we record 24 different descriptive attributes about a segment of trail. And those kind of look like this. So a segment is created when any one of these changes. So, for example, we could have like the property name could be the Schwamigan National Forest. If it became open to bikes, that would create a new segment. Or if it was routed on an existing trail with a different name, that would become a new segment. Or if it happened to jump onto a forest road, that would create a new segment. So we have a huge amount of segmentation in our database. We have a ton of segments. When I work with like graphic designers and give them our data, they're just like, what is this? Because it's like any one of these 24 things can create a new kind of splice in the trail line. And so what we do with all of this is you can kind of do some analysis, some basic statistics. So the most basic thing that I do all the time is just reporting on miles of trail built. So in this case, I use the state attribute. So all of the segments within a given state have that shared attribute, and then I can use the software to calculate a mileage based on state. I could do that mileage calculation for any other attribute in the system too. So kind of a goofy example of that would be, there's the Dakota grasslands in North Dakota. They have some interesting signage about these like livestock protection dogs that are out on the trail, like literally just out there guarding sheep, and they will like run up to you and intimidate you. So for example, we could use GIS to calculate the miles of off-road trail open to horses and camping, where livestock protection dogs may be present. So, you can just kind of build and build and build your query in GIS and do all kinds of different analysis. So that is just a quick overview kind of like the behind the scenes GIS stuff. Does anyone have any questions with any of that? All right, so then, kind of the most obvious outcome of our mapping program are maps. So we kind of categorize it as three groupings of maps that we produce. So those of you that mentioned using the Avenza app on the North Virginia Trail, you've used these geospatial enabled PDF maps that we make. Those are also great to just print off and have. I actually really enjoy just using a paper map on the trail a lot of the time. Of course, totally having Avenza as a backup in my pocket, but it is kind of nice to like spending so much time with this technology to kind of like put it away, paper map every once in a while. So that's our primary hiking map product. And I think even as we move forward with new tools like the Far Out app and, as things evolve, I'm anticipating the day that Google takes on a larger, trail-oriented mapping type project. We'll always kind of, I think, offer these paper maps as a good backup to, electronics. It's just kind of a best practice for when you're out in the woods, in remote areas where tool, it's always good to have a good paper map. So I think that's a role that the NCTA plays, and that's a service we'll continue to provide regardless of how technology evolves, at least for the next decade or so. And then we do this online map, and it's been a great tool for us. And then so those are kind of public facing points, and then we do what we call project maps, which are anything that our staff produces or that we produce for the National Park Service related to trail planning and route development. So here's kind of a look into the analytics of the usage that we get. So our numbers are not like huge in the grand scheme of things, but they're fairly big, relatively speaking, for us. We've grown substantially. So just under 50,000 PDF map downloads as of like middle of the summer for like a year. So that's pretty substantial. We've had those maps, we update them, but the maps have been up there for a long time. So, I don't know if those are new downloads or, re-downloads from the same user. We don't have that analytic built into it, but 50,000 downloads is substantial for us. That's pretty big. So we were kind of trending about 4,000 or so downloads a month. And then 20,000 in the Avenza app, which really surprises me because I would have thought more folks were using Avenza than the PDF maps, because that's all you hear people talk about. In fact, it just gets referred to seamlessly as like an Avenza product when it really is just like a standalone PDF that you can happen to use in Avenza. And then our online map does get a substantial amount of traffic. So we, in 2021, we're just under 250,000 views. So that's a lot for us. That's, a much bigger number than that 50,000 downloads. So much so that I was driving one day and got a call from someone in Redlands, California, where ESRI is located, and like a developer that just wanted to check in with me. They had noticed that our online map was getting a lot of use, even within the usage that other maps in their system get, and they just wanted to see how things are going, how we were using it, if there's anything they could do to help us out. So I thought that was kind of cool. I think that's really a testament in some part to like how dedicated some of our volunteers are. I mean, these folks live and breathe the North Country Trail. And I'm guessing that those are a large part of those numbers, people that are just on it constantly. And so we also do a bunch of promotional maps. You may have seen some of these. This one I think is maybe Wetmore Landing in Marquette. And then this is kind of the mapping for the the Jordan 45 chapter, which is near Charlevoix. So this is like their chapter brochure. So we do that kind of stuff. We do kiosk maps, chapter brochure maps, all kinds of stuff. So in addition to our core centerline and point data set, we have a number of other data sets that we develop and maintain. So for example, like our roads, rivers, elevation contours and stuff like that that we use in our maps, those are like customized by us, but they're not like exclusively ours. They're kind of derived from either USGS or Forest Service data, or yeah, mostly those two sources. We do customize them, but they're not like our core data sets. So we have a couple other things that are really significant to our work. And so two examples of those, one from kind of like the trail management side is this newer initiative we've started where we're mapping all of the trail access agreements that we have. So to get the trail on a piece of private land, we generally have some sort of agreement with that landowner. So we've kicked off like a map-based organizational process for those agreements. And then the other data set that's kind of significant is our half-mile waypoints, which is more of a trail user data set than a trail management data set, but I'll talk about both of those. Oops. So our trail access agreements, so this is down by Kalamazoo, Michigan, or Battle Creek, Michigan, actually. So basically these purplish pink parcels are the county tax parcels. So each of these are either individual landowners or you know, a landowner that owns a number of parcels. And we have an agreement with each of these folks. So these are all some version of private land. And so what we've done is gone to like the county, pulled down the parcel data for the actual property, because the agreement is for the property, not so much the trail. So I've then built some simple attributes about that property. So in this case, it's a MOU, a memorandum of understanding. Another type of agreement could be like an easement, a non-binding handshake agreement. In Minnesota, we have leases with the state on some of the state lands that are not like parklands. The state just has different land holdings. We actually have to get a lease with them, so that we could have lease as an attribute there. And then it just kind of talks about who is the agreement with, and when was it signed, and does it have an expiration? And then I've kept it intentionally simple because I link directly to the primary documents. So you can click this link, it goes into our cloud file sharing system and brings up a folder that any relevant documents for that agreement can be put into, and the user can just click on the you know, click on documents and open them, and there you go. So it's a very nice visual way to organize this information. It's interesting. A lot of the folks that work in like the Park Service office or our staff that doesn't work in a specific state, that works in all the states, it really becomes overwhelming to like work with groups that are focused on like 80 miles of, you know, our volunteer groups are focused on like 80 miles of trail. They have unique names for everything that they, you know, talk fluently about, and you'll just get a phone call that's like, hey, such and such thing is happening on this property, you know, it's on the trail once you cross, you know, just north of such and such road. And you know, it becomes very overwhelming to kind of understand the trail at that hyper local level, the way our volunteers do for a lot of newer staff members that are working at the national level. So I think this is just another great resource for them to be able to look at, you know, zoom into the property. They can even search the names that they're being given, and then boom, they have all the agreement documentation right there at their fingertips. Cool for us, but really pretty basic in the world of GIS. Any questions with any of that? All right. So the other data set I want to talk about was our half-mile waypoints. You've probably seen these. This is an idea I borrowed from the Pacific Crest Trail. There were 2 volunteers, two Pacific Crest Trail through hikers. Actually, they weren't even really like association volunteers. They were kind of like got a substantial amount of money from the tech industry and kind of like quit their jobs and hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. So they were like techie folks. And this was like, I don't know, let's just say like around 2010. You know, not everyone had a smartphone, and the main like navigational tool that you brought were like these GPS receivers. And in Garmin GPS receivers, which are the most popular ones, there's a limitation of you can't have a line, like you can't have a very long line loaded into a GPS receiver. Like you can fit usually like one county in Michigan of the North Country Trail as one file in a Garmin. So you would have to have like the North Country Trails, like many files, and then you'd have limitations there as well. So the idea they came up with is like, it's actually the density of these vertices in the line, like kind of the breadcrumb trail in the line that is the file size issue. So they said, well, why not just distill the trail down to like a half-mile point, and that should be good enough for us to like find our way along the trail. So you'll always know where you are within like a half-mile. So just wonderful idea. Boom, it helps. I used to spend a ton of time talking to folks about how to use their Garmin receivers and why it wasn't working with the data and things like that. So this was just initially just became this great data set that you could load on a Garmin without any like hiccups and just go out in the field and follow the breadcrumb trail along the North Country Trail. And then we realized instantly like, oh, we can label these and put them on our maps, and then you have these paper maps and this tool that allows you to instantly figure out where you are. So that was super useful, and they've kind of just taken on a life of their own from there. Both good and bad. We had an older volunteer, like he offered to shuttle some hikers, and they were like, pick us up at mile, 528. And he's like, this is kind of when they first came out. He had like no idea what they were talking about. So that's cool that we're able to talk about the trail that way. But then if there's one, I generate these for each state. So if there's one reroute anywhere in the state, it will kind of reshuffle the entire, the location for all the points. So it's cool, but I'm also like always kind of nervous about like, oh man, I hope like, I always I do all my updates for everything at once. I never like update things out of sync, but I just, that then requires if folks, they have to download, make sure they have the most recent version of the maps downloaded or the data downloaded and stuff like that. I've never really heard of any problems of people getting out of sync with each other, but just something to watch out for. All right, and then kind of the last thing I just wanted to touch on was the trail planning and route development work that we do, just kind of keeping it superficial coverage of this. So this is our kind of trail management staff. We have a regional trail coordinator in each state. All of them, but our Michigan guy actually have multiple states. So that's why we only have 4 coordinators, our director of trail operations, Valerie, and then myself. So these folks are out in the field with those iPads and Bad Elf GPS receivers, updating our trail line. And they're also working with the volunteer and the service and like the Forest Service or the state land managing agency, to plan and develop new section trail. In a lot of ways, our public work is, I don't want to say it's like done, but most of the trail on our major public lands is developed at this point in time. So we're really shifting and focusing on looking for opportunities to work with private landowners. And our Park Service has launched kind of a new initiative too. They've gotten a little bit more involved. They have a lot of obligations within the Environmental Protection Act and endangered species obligations and stuff like that. So they do like a review, like a environmental protection review and a cultural and archaeological review for like making sure that there's no like sensitive artifacts or potentially sensitive artifacts or anything in the area when we're developing a new section of trail. So we'll work, we're kind of like those regional trail coordinators are kind of like the go-between between the volunteers and the National Park Service They're out there GPSing, you know, a route for the trail. They're all highly skilled individuals as far as knowing how to design a trail and how to, you know, consider things like how it lays in the landscape, water erosion, you know, sustainability and stuff like that. They're all experts in that. So they're doing kind of what we call trail design work, which is, you know, that exact location of the trail. And then they have to inventory a lot of the features that are out there. So this example here is just outside of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, in a big section we're working on. So they had to kind of inventory like what trail structures they'll need to put in place, what are the significant features we're crossing, and then we provide all of this back to the National Park Service, and they do their review to make sure that they're in compliance with the obligations that the federal government has for not, you know, disturbing any cultural sites or impacting any sensitive species. And once all that is done, and we've got landowner agreements in place, that our volunteers can go out and do what they're good at, which is, you know, building the trail and putting the blazes up, and then it becomes open and ready for use. So this is like the example of the maps we'd be providing to the Park Service, and then they would provide that on to different contractors and archaeological staff that they work with.
Is that part of the trail that we helped? Well, I guess we didn't do a lot of the work, but the AH, American Hiking Society crew started to build this year?
Maybe this is just right out of Grand Rapids and it goes to the forest, to the Chippewa.
Yeah, I think that might be where we joined up with a crew from American Hiking Society and Matt Davis and.
Okay, yeah, Grand Rapids, Grand Rapids is like right here. Yeah, so yeah, and then that's where the chip starts right here. So yeah, it's a pretty cool project. A lot of moving parts to get that in place, and there will be a lot more of that too. I mean, the more we move going, I guess, northeast out of Grand Rapids, you know, along the Mesabi. Right now we use this regional like paved snowmobile in the winter trail called the Mesabi Trail. But the idea would be to move as much as we can off of that because of the snowmobile side. So there'll be, you know, this will be ongoing everywhere that we don't have trail built.
Cool. It's kind of cool to see the background stuff on projects like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm just like touching the surface. It's you know, this is just all the fun map side of it. It's like there's so many stakeholders involved, and yeah, there's a lot that goes into what you think would just be a simple thing of just, you know, putting a trail on the ground, no big deal, right? It gets fairly complicated. I think you know, the Appalachian Trail is considered the like largest land trust type land conservation effort ever, like in the world. It's, you know, it's a tremendous feat to have in a sense that Appalachian Trail is complete, you know, and they have a corridor along the trail. We don't have that in a lot of places. You know, it's just the North Country Trail. The Appalachian Trail, actually, they own, the federal government generally owns like a corridor along that trail as well. So yeah, it's a lot that goes into it. So I haven't been looking at the chat. I see there's some things up there. Okay, just basic comments, cool. Yeah, so any questions? I spend a lot more time in front of a computer than I would have thought when I was going into this. Like I said, I was working at a community planning firm, which had a lot of potential to make money, and it was very cool. Like, it's very cool work, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of, like, every night was, you know, we worked for communities, for counties, for townships, for cities all over the state of Michigan. So every night was traveling to a meeting or traveling, you know, and I thought, oh man, like, cool, I can take I love computer stuff and love mapping and geography, and I can just like do that and combine that with my love of hiking in the outdoors. And I did for a while, and then we hired other specialized staff to spend time on the trail, and now I just spend like all my time behind a computer, which is okay. It fits with my where I'm at in my life with the family and stuff like that. But yeah.
Does your job ever take you out on the trail specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think the last time. Okay, like yeah, just a couple weeks ago, when I was driving to the office in Lowell, Michigan, which is by Grand Rapids, there was a new section of paved trail that a township had built that we're locating the North Country Trail on, and the volunteers weren't sure if that was like they weren't sure exactly what was done. Was it done? How far it was completed to? So I like stopped and looked at that. I kind of just do stuff. I kind of like do spot checking that's just close to me. Normally I would rely on our Michigan Regional Trail Coordinator now to do any, like if it's a new section of trails being built or we're scouting, like in the UP, he's doing that all the time, not me. So I used to do a fair bit of that, but not as much anymore.
Besides like knowing how to use ArcGIS or some other system, I guess, what kind of things did you have to learn or classes did you have to take to actually like use this practically or to do what you do now?
Yeah. Yeah. ArcGIS, well, GIS is interesting. And I think it's a lot like graphic design or database in the sense that, yeah, it's a particular software package, but it's all built on kind of academic concepts. So like every little module in ArcGIS is like some concept that some academic came up with or some process as like, this is how you do this geoprocessing function. So in school, we learned those things. We learned what it was actually doing. So I'm almost like, I could do it on any platform because I know like conceptually what I want to try to do. So I think that if that makes sense, I think that was like the biggest thing.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Kind of a obsessive like to figure stuff out with computers. So I'll really dig in and figure it out generally. So yeah, an obsessive unwillingness to give up on computer issues and a solid understanding of like the concepts that the software is built on. I think that makes for a successful GIS person. I think I would have said a couple years ago that I would have thought like web programming was really important. But a lot of that is even becoming like it's done for you. You just click the colors you want and the symbols you want, and it's all like very much this like what we used to call what you see is what you get type editor type stuff. So even like programming languages, I don't think, at least to some degree, especially if you're focused more on the cartography side of things, are not as important as they once were. Although I still do like very basic scripting and programming and structured query language work. Yeah, I really started GIS at an interesting time. It was all like, it was very not visual when I was just getting into it. It was all like ArcInfo was the big software package at the time. And you like, literally, it was like this command prompt and you typed in all the things you wanted it to do. And then it would like say that it was doing them. And then you could like, then you could visualize what it had done and you're like, hope it worked, you know, type thing. But right as I was like in school, it kind of switched over to this much more user-friendly, visual-oriented software that we're all kind of used to now with all software. So like it's like you just could get any job you wanted. It was like, well, what county job am I gonna get? I mean, or like what city am I gonna go work for? Because they were all just hiring new positions, just boom, 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 left and right. So much different landscape than you all face nowadays. And you know, all those positions are now filled and you know, stuff like that. So it was an interesting time to get into GIS. It really was like kind of the peak of its introduction everywhere. Like everyone was jumping on board with it.
So I have a question. So as often as you like update the maps and stuff, how often does that get communicated to like other websites? Like I know like Google, sometimes I will try to find like a particular parking area or a particular campground in Google and it takes me somewhere totally different than where it actually is. Or if I'm looking at like the DNR website, like I know the DNR website is like more accurate than Google or whatever. Like are you the one that's also like sending those updates to other like tracking webs or like GPS websites, or like how does that, like why aren't they all easily
Yeah.
connected, I guess?
Yeah. So a lot of so like we have a great relationship with Michigan DNR, Wisconsin DNR. So they have our data, almost like a live link of our data behind the scenes. So they're working with that in that way. So I almost don't need to send stuff to them anymore. They just like have it all the time. They would ask me if they were doing something major just to make sure that they were working from the right data set. And then there's like, Google's interesting in that it's almost using like some sort of algorithm to just scour data and generate their information, including their Street View stuff. I mean, that comes into play with what they show. And I look at their data a lot too for reference. Not so much for our stuff. I guess that's for like related type stuff. I'll try to find a crossroad or something. But what I was going to say is one of the major data sharing things that we do is push data up to the USGS. And that is really seen because we're in this world of like, anybody can make data for anything, you know, right? So you've got to identify yourself as like an authoritative data source. That's kind of the industry terminology. And the USGS is the authoritative data source. We're considered that to a degree. I think we're doing better and better at that. But Google, for instance, isn't like, how do I update the North Country Trail? They're just like, I want to update all trails in the nation at once, you know. So that type of stuff would come from a USGS source. So that's where a lot of our stuff comes from. And then we've had others like OnX, for example, who's just a small software outfit in like Bozeman, Montana. We've talked to them about a lot of different things over the years. So they're hyper aware of us. But I think they're just like pulling our data off of our website without asking us or something, because they had all this stuff on there and we had to like make a change because of an upset landowner. And they like, I don't know, it was a weird situation. I don't know that for sure. I don't know where they got the data for us. They never said, but it surely looked like data that they had like kind of just, oh, we know them, they're cool. We've had good conversations. We'll just pull their data down today and throw it on our app. So that's the really cool thing about working with the Far Out Guthook app, which is this, you know, really popular backpacking app. They're going to exclusively work with us, so we will provide them all the updates. And if there's like an issue that comes up, they'll be cool and like represent the trail how we need it represented. So that's where that authoritative data source thing is really like, that's the prime example of a good relationship there. We've got an app developer with a huge audience, and rather than, you know, pull the data from state and old USGS files and this and that, they're just going to like go right to us for it, and we're their only source of data. So I'm really happy about that relationship. And then there's other apps like All Trails that's user created content. Like I've tried to talk to them and they're just like, they weren't like negative or anything. They're just like, we're not, like, our app is built on this concept of user created input. Like, you go out for a hike and your data goes into their system. Like, that conceptually, the idea of a agency that manages a bunch of trails, like being the source of data on their app, didn't fit into their concept at all. So I love the idea of user created stuff. Like OpenStreetMap is great. That has a ton of user created stuff in it. But that's like also good and bad, because like the Forest Service, for example, one of the legal documents for like what roads you can travel on in a forest is the map that they produce, that each forest produces, you know. So if you have like an OpenStreetMap or somebody on X, you know, that's also producing like a road map, that like undermines how they're trying to manage that piece of public land. And generally there's a good reason for what they're trying to do. You know, maybe there's a sensitive habitat or lots of erosion or something like that, you know, that they're trying to close off. So yeah, I don't know. It's a mixed bag. We have like volunteers and staff. If they find something wrong on Google, you can like submit corrections. And they ask you like who you are and how you know that this is correct. And generally we've had those go through.
Cool. Mapping is complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I just, and the whole thing is like, I don't think Google or someone like them, who's like them, I guess, just them really. I don't think, you know, they've gotten that serious about trails. And when they do, it's, you know, I mean, I think it's, I don't know, all over, but I don't know, on the way they map, you know, there's roads, they do such a great job with roads, kind of, unless you're in the UP, then not such a great job. But yeah, I don't know, they have such better resources for road mapping than they would trail mapping. So we'll see, but I would think at some point in the future, there will be some just kind of like universal clearinghouse of information. In a lot of ways, OpenStreetMap might be like a little sneak peek of what that would look like, because there's quite a bit of trail information on the OpenStreetMap platform globally, actually. So.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Matt, for going through that presentation with us.
For sure.
I actually don't have anything else to go over tonight unless anybody else has like any general questions about next gen. Otherwise, we can all log off. All right. All right, I'm going to close her down. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Bye.